isn't it?
Not that late. Hey, everybody. How are you? Welcome to Into the Core podcast and the Roundtable Talks. It's the virtual edition. My name is Linda, and I am really excited to have you here. Now, we're talking about secondhand clothing and the effects on Africa and the economy. Is it a great thing? Is it a bad thing? What is it? We're going to get into that. But before we get into that, let's get into the core.
Into the core.
Get into it.
All good things in Africa and beyond. Into the core.
Get into it.
Into the core.
Get into it.
All good things in Africa and beyond.
So we're really excited to have on our panel a really great group of people. So we're fortunate to bring one of the most amazing people, Steven Bethell, co-founder of Bank and Vogue. He's also the pioneer of shaping the global circular economy, especially in textiles. Yes. I think I love the fact that I actually reached out to him, but his extensive experience in brokering goods and reducing textile waste worldwide provides a very invaluable space for him to be here. And it isn't just about this opportunity, it's also about having the most beautiful Mutete Bakita of Fashion Revolution Kenya, who's also making beautiful men's and steps here in Nairobi and making sure that Fashion Revolution is seen and heard globally. So guys, welcome to the table.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, fantastic. So Steve, is it possible that we could just start with just a brief intro of what you and your company does with Bank and Vogue, and then we'll get into you, Mutete. Is that okay?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah. I almost feel like ladies should be first, but yeah, that's but having
Saturday.
No, so Bank and Vogue is a company that was started 25 years ago, and our moniker is innovative and relevant solutions to the crisis of stuff. And we as a company, we have sort of 4 or 5 silos that we operate in. The first is that we buy used clothes from charities and private collectors throughout the United States and Canada and Europe, and we find homes for it around the world. Most of them go to grading houses or thrift operators throughout the world. We also have and the scale of that business is we sell about 4 million garments a week of secondhand clothes. And then secondly, we have a chain of retail stores in the UK, Sweden, and Finland, which emulate the trends of the day through used, and that operates under Beyond Retro. Thirdly, if we can't resell something and we can't resell it in our own stores, can we upcycle it? Can we cut it up and turn it into something new? And so we have an upcycling division in where we make and have partnered with the likes of Converse, making the upper of the Chuck Taylor shoe, or partner with Coach to make components for their classic Soho bag. And also made a collab with the likes of Wrangler, cutting up old garments and then making them an input to new manufacturing. But then the fourth silo as a business is, if we can't resell it, if we can't upcycle it, can we sort it, grade it, and pre-process it for the input to fiber-to-fiber recycling? And this year alone, we have sent to recyclers about 24,000 metric tons of material for textile recycling. So the space we operate in is basically, I frolic in the pile of used clothes and love the trade, and also I'm respectful of the fact that it's not perfect, but we can talk about that.
Okay, that's interesting. Mutete, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do with your with Fashion Revolution, as well as your own private projects that you run?
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Mutete Bakita, and I'm the current country coordinator of Fashion Revolution. I am also the founder of 25 Swap. And I'll go into Fashion Revolution first. So, Fashion Revolution is a global movement that advocates for a fair, clean, accountable textile and fashion industry around the world. And as Kenya, we want to nuance the conversation to really understanding what does sustainability, what does conscious fashion, what does regenerative fashion mean in the Kenyan context, in the local context. It's something that I think we've known for, it's in our blood. It's coded in us. So it's nothing new to us. It's almost about reigniting that spark of conscious living through fashion. And so part of what we do is, do we want to rebuild, like ask certain questions like, do we want to rebuild the fashion industry, and how does that look? How do we as Africans or Kenyans consume fashion? And so it's about recognizing the problems that exist on our land, but also finding solutions that are relevant and relatable to us as Africans. And so through Kenya, we really want to amplify the Kenyan and African voice for it to be on a global stage, just to make our voices much louder and much heard. And as 25 SWAP, we reignite again the spark of conscious living through fashion, and we do it through hosting different activities. Mainly we do clothes swaps because it's such a fun and simple activity to extend the lives of your clothes and to appreciate your clothes and other people's clothes, and to honor the people that made them, And so we also have workshops and educative forums. Through our workshops, we really want people to learn the hands-on skills that it takes to mend, to upcycle, even as you said, which is absolutely incredible. How do we break down clothes, and how do we build them up to create to create new things? I think the opportunities are endless on how we can really extend the lives of clothes and honor the people that made them. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I love your 254 swap. And I feel like everybody needs to kind of take that in. We were talking about that on Saturday when we had our virtual roundtable at CaliWorks. Again, thank you to CaliWorks for hosting us this past Saturday. That was absolutely amazing. I was really thrilled and honored. But Steven, if we're talking about Bank and Vogue, what has been, you've had decades of experience. What has been your take on the secondhand evolution of clothing here in Africa? What do you think about our scope of secondhand clothing?
Well, the first thing is that it's Africa itself is such a big and diverse continent that it's important to kind of to sort of contextualize it, and you see what's going on in North Africa and Northeast Africa, East Africa, South Africa. There's a lot of different dynamics that are going on throughout the continent. So it's a big question because the continent is so diverse. But certainly the nature of the trade in East Africa has changed somewhat in the last 5 years specifically, because particularly the Chinese resellers have moved into the marketplace. Kenya alone has over 2 million people employed in the secondhand clothing industry. But it used to be maybe 5 years ago, 5% of the market was Chinese secondhand clothes. And now it's north of 65%. And certainly just in terms of a Kenyan conversation, and that's certainly not necessarily a bad thing, but the nature of the clothes are different. The number, so the the clothes tend to be of a different quality. And so, as crazy as it is, that if you make a lot more clothes out of synthetics, so that's another thing that's happening just generally globally, is clothes are less made out of natural fibers, cotton, for example, and more out of synthetics. You actually get more pieces per pound in the bales. So there's market dynamics that are changing by competitors moving in, or different supplies coming in, but also the nature of the clothes are changing by the way in which, or the inputs that they are being made. Less natural fibers, more synthetics, and the synthetics are arguably way less, so you get more items per pound. I mean, at the end of the day, the industry is on a pound basis. So it's the nature of the trade is like every trade is dynamic. And on the North African side, just as a quick highlight of some of the things going on, the Europeans are really struggling in the used clothing trade. That Eastern European customer base, which was Russia, has been shut off. So there's a lot more clothes coming south from Europe. And on, just kind of moving around, when you go to West Africa, you're certainly seeing, whether it be in Ghana, Togo, Benin, a real struggle for, again, the friction between the Chinese and the European or American goods coming in. It's always exciting. The market dynamics are real, and it changes with the players, and it changes with the nature of the clothes that are being made. I lament that there's more synthetics, but that's just me.
Why? So we were just having this conversation actually on Saturday with someone who had joined the group, who had come with Janet, who you're going to meet shortly. I'm going to bring her into the conversation shortly. But Mwangi had mentioned something about, he's doing research on the continent between the UK and Kenya, and then just realizing that, all the beautiful vintage stuff definitely goes to Dise, Japan, and then we definitely get the the rough end of it, obviously the synthetic, which is just flooding the market. Do you feel like there's a rhyme reason why that happens, or is that just how it's structured?
So when the sorting centers make the decision, hey, do I want to send something to Japan, or do I want to send it to East London, or do I want to send it to Kenya? A lot of the conversations are market based, and frankly, what a sorter's job is to do is to sort for highest economic value. And obviously, the Japanese are renowned for paying crazy prices for a 1950s pair of Levi's. They'll pay $2,000-3,000 for US dollars. And so when you have a market that doesn't have that ability to pay, then the decisions are made of where it goes. So I feel like those are a lot of market determined sorting, rather than any kind of the rhyme or reason is chasing the wallet,
Right. And for you, Mutete, what is your take on, and I want to say the fashion, the secondhand clothing here, but what is fashion revolution doing to, what is fashion revolution doing, especially with secondhand clothing? What is your stance in Nairobi? I know we always have that year, once a year we're talking about, who made my clothes, which is a great campaign. But then beyond that, what is FashRev doing, especially in Kenya, in regards to secondhand clothing? And
Um, I think one of our major things is really spotlighting what exactly goes on the ground. And one of those ways is, I mean, I think sharing resources for us is like a really, really big thing, because there's so many different people doing amazing things. Like there's a documentary that was released by Clean Up Kenya, called, I think it was a stealth report, something. I can't remember the name, but they go and they highlighted how these lower grade clothes that are flooding the market, and you could see that they highlighted, getting t-shirts, McDonald t-shirts that still had the tag on, for some employees, for example. We have an amazing person on our team called Janet, who is a really big, she really shouts about the secondhand market and the landfill space, and highlighting it. But over and above that, something that we really want to do that we haven't yet done is really mapping out how clothes enter our market from the port, and how it's redistributed around the country, because it's something that's really interesting and fascinating. How we'd go to Ushago, or go to where our ancestors have come from, and you see someone wearing a Yale shirt or a Harvard shirt. So what exactly is how have we mapped it out? So that's something that's really incredible, and I think that we really want to focus on as well. But something that we also realize over and above the secondhand industries is understanding our own fabrics, but our own local textile industry, and highlighting the regenerative industry that exists in Kenya, in terms of natural fibers. You talked about cotton, but also talking about hemp, talking about linen, talking about all these different regenerative fibers that exist within the Kenyan landscape. I think is something even over and above talking about the secondhand industry, is something that we really want to, keep talking about and keep shouting about. Something else is just like having different events across the year that honors the clothes that we wear. So if it's having clothes swaps, if it's having discussions where we are not only talking about the main topics, but how do we collectively solve or create, what are they called, solutions to the issues that exist. And one of those things is like really talking about policies that exist. What policies exist around the fashion and textile industry in Kenya, if there are any, and if there are, where are we falling short? And really bringing different voices into the conversation, whether it's policy makers, whether it is sorters within Dandora, and having everyone on the same conversation and the same table, kind of like having a discussion. And that's where the real solutions start to come out. Because even in the conversation that we were having on Saturday, Nathalie said that, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the government. So what policies are in place? And what policies can we put in place? And I don't think it's something that can be solved without co-curation. So really putting all these different voices in one room and unpacking the problems and creating the solutions.
Right. I want to bring to the table Janet. Janet, can you hear us? Because she's already on screen.
Yes.
Hi, Janet. How are you?
Good. I don't know if you can see me.
There you are. Can you see her?
Hi.
I can see her beautiful face. Yes.
Good.
All right, Janet. So can you tell us, first of all, it would be great to introduce you to everybody. Janet is probably one of the most, courageous superstars who's gone into Dandora, who goes into the clothing minefields, honestly. And I just find it amazing that you actually can do that on a daily basis and highlight what is happening there. So I have to give you your flowers for that. It's not the easiest space to be in, but I know how passionate you are. So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great that you've been able to bring us together, and I'm so sorry for being a little bit late. My name is Chemutai Janet. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I am a slow fashion educator. And what that means is that I do storytelling around the fashion industry, showing the reality of fashion on the ground in terms of textile waste. And Kenya receives a lot of secondhand clothes. So, showing what that means for us here in Kenya by going to the market and showcasing through videos what really happens, like who are the people who sell at the market, where do the textiles that are not sold end up, especially because there's a lot of clothing alterations that happen in the market because a lot of the clothes that come in are undesirable in terms of either they're oversized, they're torn or stained, and so for people who buy these clothes to go and resell them, for them to have a value that will return their money back to them, then they have to do a number of alterations to make them more marketable, and most of that is done in the market. And unfortunately, a lot of textile waste comes from that. And since we have a really poor waste management system, or rather, I think most Kenyans um, lack the grasp of what sustainable waste management is, like on an individual level. And so a lot of this textile offcuts end up being discarded on the floor of the market. And there's a river, Nairobi River, that passes right next to the market. So unfortunately, most of this offcuts end up into the river. And apart from that, I'm also the founder of Tengeneza Cafe, and Tengeneza means to make or to repair in English. And what I do with that is I do repair workshops where we kind of like just come together and learn the value of loving our clothes better by learning how to use our hands, and going back to learning how to stitch, like at touching a button, because I think it's very important for people to be in touch with their clothes. And then I think with that, when we bring all these other discussions on why fashion is important, when you know how to repair your clothes, then I think you're kind of more open to having more conversations around the fashion industry. Over.
Thank you. Well, you do so much. I mean, like you wear so many hats, and it's amazing how you really do impact a lot of us, especially those who are getting into learning more about secondhand clothing. Stephen, I have a quick question for you. I mean, like, so you've been in the secondhand market, but what's the whole idea right now? I mean, like, what's the role right now of you shaping a more sustainable, um, more inclusive fashion industry? What's the role that you guys want to play, and what does that mean for even us in Africa who are sitting here in Africa? What can we take away from you?
Well, I would never want to give advice about somebody to follow what we're doing. So, so having said that, the things that I'm excited about in our space is that there's a renewed, or at least a real interest in textile recycling. It's like, how do we take the oversized clothes that there is no market for, right? And I'm a Canadian, so I'm allowed to make fun of Americans. And there's a lot of large waisted Americans out there. So I'm able to tease them because we're their neighbors. But, the question is, as an industry, is can we develop textile recycling facilities where material is turned back into the input for new fibers? And then if it's not relevant product, it should never be sent to a Kenya or to a Ghana, to whoever, in anywhere in the world. And so I think that this work in sorting to scale, and then pre-processing, meaning how do we deal with the buttons and the zippers and the nylon threads? That work that we're doing at our facility to get closer to textile circularity is really important. Like in another hat that I wear, I'm proud to say that I'm a board member of Accelerating Circularity. So I'd encourage people to look at Accelerating Circularity's website, and you'll see that this is an action-based organization that is trying to encourage the connections between industry stakeholders to be able to create circularity at scale. And so I feel as if that's a really important element. But backing up a little bit further, it's also, before an item is shredded and turned into something else, the work that Bank and Vogue is doing on upcycling for somebody like the Soho bag with Coach, or the upper for the Chuck Taylor shoe. We see that our planet, we share this planet together. And right now, I'm obviously talking to you from Canada, but we have already in June some of the worst forest fires that our country has ever seen. Yesterday, Toronto, our business capital, had the worst air pollution quality in the world, and it's because our planet's burning. And so, we often, when you talk about air pollution, you say India has a bad pollution or Pakistan has bad air pollution, but right now it's Toronto and some of the other major Canadian cities. And so we as a company are really focused on I really liked your idea about, how do you teach people to sew a button on? Like, that's the simplest of things, is just indicative of what we all can do as a path. But at scale, working with a Converse, working with a Coach, we're showing that upcycling can be the quickest path to making product from existing product. And I feel like that's a model that the upcycling at scale can be a model, and also the textiles. Those two things, I believe, is an important part of the landscape of the conversation.
And is there a way, I mean, like, and I want to give this to Janet and Mutete. I mean, like, for our side of, creating a space where we could get to the garments and start pre-processing, as Steven has mentioned, do you think that we have the facility to be able to do that, especially here in Kenya? And what would we require? And I'm just saying Kenya, but I think Africa as a whole, but Kenya.
Well, and there's some really great examples in Kenya. You have Africa Collects, right? The Kenyan-based organization that's doing some amazing upcycling work. I just met them in Brussels at the Textile Recycling Expo. I just met the delegation from the Nigerian government, who were working on this exact question of what can they do in Nigeria, a populace of 100 and so on million people. I think that I really like Janet's. The first step is just to swap your clothes. It's like the simplest thing is to not buy anything.
Yeah. Was it Nathalie who also was just like, we're so done with brands? She mentioned that on Saturday. She was like, we don't need another brand in the market. We need you to start, learning how to swap your clothes and upcycle them, figure out a different way of recreating them. And obviously between Janet, Fashion Revolution, and wherever Nathalie is with Africa Collect Textiles, it definitely can become something much bigger. And we were actually thinking of doing a little bit of a tour with some of the kids here in Nairobi, and taking them to see what Janet does, and so that they have a better understanding and a better appreciation for the clothes that they actually have in their closets. So yeah, Janet, what is your take?
On if there's room for us to do that and what we need.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we have the capability of doing that here, but the one thing that we really lack is money, and we keep asking for that. And it's also one of the things that Africa Collect textiles, even though they do have money for now to do that, they still struggle to get more money to help support their work. And that's the one thing that we really lack, because we have people who are willing to be upskilled, like to be trained, that we will never lack any skills. And we also have a lot of people who are willing to be in that space and work and be paid for it. But we need to find ways in which money can come to Kenya, money can come to Africa, and be able to support all these textile waste processes that we're trying to achieve, especially since a lot of the clothes that are overproduced and overconsumed end up in Africa. So why are these people and businesses not willing to give money for us to take care of the waste that they're producing?
What about the fact that we have, when we're talking about the economies and everything? I mean, right now, if you think about Dandora and if you think about Ikomba, you talk about creation of jobs and people having jobs in that sector. I mean, then what happens to them? It's questionable, because, and I see it across the cycle, because it becomes such an elitist of don't buy any clothes, right? I get the secondhand clothing side, but there's a space where I'm just like, okay, there's so many guys who are employed in these spaces. Then what happens? And I talk about factories and the guys who are making all these amazing, beautiful clothes that still end up in our landmines here. What happens to them? We've got our manufacturing industry, and those are millions of jobs, millions of lives.
I think when we had the discussion on Saturday, and I think one of the things that came up was that we honestly cannot do away with secondhand clothes right now. We're not, I think even just globally, we're not at a place where we can stop that from happening. And we need to have governments in this conversation, especially the Kenyan government, because I think we keep throwing these words around, circularity and green jobs and like reviving our local textile industry. But I think they just understand the textbook definition of these words, but not what it means in practice. And I think
Yeah.
when we are all at the round table and we're having this discussions, and they understand how does the hierarchy work, I think that would really help put things in perspective. And I like that you are open to inviting these stakeholders to the next roundtable, so that we can see how do we all share the experiences that we have, not just the expertise but the experience as well, and just getting out of this bubble that is like very textbook definitions. Because I have been in meetings with representatives from the Kenyan National Environmental Management Authority, and I can confidently say that they know nothing about what happens on the ground. Maybe they read reports and all of that, but they don't really know what happens. They don't know what kind of people, like let's say, work in the dump site or work in the market. How does this business support them? If we took time to, and like all of us just understand how the ecosystem works and how can this, let's say, trade be of benefit to Kenyans, and not just from an economic point of view, but also how does it like holistically touch on the environment and uplifting people across the chain, not just the traders, but trickling down even to the West because everyone has a role to play. Then I think we will be at a better place. But for as long as we're just always speaking amongst themselves, then we will always have gaps, regardless of how much work we put in on our end. Then the government will always be putting energy somewhere else that does not really connect with what is happening on the ground.
Right.
Could I just
Go ahead, Steven.
add to that? Yeah, if I can add to that, at least and I want to tread gently because I'm obviously a guest, but every time we ship a sorted graded container into Kenya, the good news is that the Kenyan government collects significant taxes. It's tens of thousands of dollars per container that's shipped in. Unlike some countries where Nigeria, the goods go to Togo and Benin and they're smuggled into Nigeria, so they don't have, the government itself doesn't have a tax base to be able to do some good. So the one good thing that's happening in Kenya is that there is an import duty that's not insignificant, and those resources sounds like they should be employed to help out the industry and any effects of the industry. But my other sort of, it's stepping away from Kenya for a second, and if you look at another market like South Africa, which bans used clothes, it's like there's an outright ban on used clothing in South Africa. The number one seller of clothes in South Africa is Shein. So part of and obviously the perspective I'm coming from. I'm involved and celebrate the secondhand clothing business, but my worry is some of these proposals about banning secondhand clothes, really come from a place where markets just want to sell more Shein product. And I don't think the world needs more Shein product, just generally. Because the crazy thing about the Shein product is that not only is it really cheaply made, not only under no conditions, to your comment about Rana Plaza, there are zero transparency on those Shein parcels that come in. But even worse, or equally as bad, not even worse, but equally as bad, is that the local governments, whether it be in Canada or the US or Kenya or South Africa, no one gets any revenue from it. No government gets revenue. And we know that good governance, at least in my country, we need the government to fight the fires up in northern Canada right now. We need tax revenue. So I'm not. I think that it's really important that tax revenue from whatever the new clothing industry or the used clothing industry needs to be deployed in the right way. And so I certainly would never tell anybody in Kenya how they should spend their tax money, but I can genuinely say that if goods come in untaxed like they do from Shein, it's a real problem for all of us, because if there's no government, what do we got? And to your Rana Plaza conversation, if there's no transparency on those garments, and something else it's not often talked about is when we are a supplier of goods to some of these fashion brands, we have to RSL test. We have to test for restricted substances, and the reality is that we have to go through massive testing. The Shein product has zero testing. It's like there's no standards. So we don't know how the garments are made, what they're made of, and we get no tax revenue.
Yeah. And if I may add, sorry, Linda, but if I may add and take us back to having policymakers and government on the table, I think it's almost like a chicken and an egg. I mean, yeah, within our space, we'll definitely fight as much as we can and educate and spread the word as much as we can and action as much as we can. And just to echo what I had said before, and also what Janet had said Nathalie had said on the day, that the buck stops with the government and the buck stops with the policies that are in place. But it's something that we also don't see, that people within our space and activists within our space, or whoever, really wanting to be the people inside. Okay, it's a bit of a kind of like a controversial conversation, because at the end of the day, the government is the government and they are what they are. But if you don't have someone within that government who has a vested interest in the space pushing the envelope, I think that's also kind of where a disconnect comes in. But it's a place to start by having them on the conversations, within the conversations, and showing them the reality on the ground. And Janet, it's commendable that you're in these spaces and having conversations with people from different organizations. And it's absolutely alarmed. I didn't even know that they don't know the reality. And we can probably guarantee each other that they are consumers of the secondhand clothing industry in Kenya. So it's a bit, you see, there's a huge disconnect. So as much as these problems and these gaps also provide spaces to create solutions, and we have many solutions. So
I don't think it's just a Kenyan problem about governments. I mean, there are policymakers in Canada and the US that are making policy that have never sorted used clothes, but somehow are making strategies. And so don't worry, we all have the same problem. Not that it's helpful, but we all have the same problem.
It's true. I mean, like, I feel like just recently, did we not get into the, buy Kenya, made in Kenya? And then you had all these, like, people in the government saying, hey, yeah, we're encouraging for people to start, manufacturing in Kenya for all these brands and everything happening here. So now there's a huge push, which by me is like, I like it. I like the whole buy Kenya, made in Kenya. But at the same time, comes back now to us talking about, where we're sourcing our, our textiles from. Does it make sense for our local economy? It's the same thing that happens now in Ethiopia. We know that we were having that conversation just in January, and come back now to our government and say, listen, stop it. There's a different way of doing this. And especially if you're going to invest into our textile industry, why don't you do it this way? But I also think that they haven't gotten a good proposal given or handed to them. So maybe even, Janet, maybe even this becomes one of those things where it's like, first, let me educate you on what is going on. You need to step into this side of what we're doing, and so that you can actually now come up with a policy, because they can't come up with a policy if they don't know what's happening. Just only recently did they start, supporting our local fashion industry. Now it's about taming them on what they're asking us to do, and actually change that conversation, and to allow them to see how they can change it. But if they don't know how to do it, then we don't have anything that we can really complain to them about, other than the taxes. Where does that go to for the secondhand clothing? I'm like, hey, cousins. Anyway, for another day.
Sorry, and before you go in, I think, and that's where transparency also comes in. And if we hold brands accountable for their transparency, even the made in Kenya brands, and the more brands that kind of feed into being transparent and telling us where they've sourced the raw materials from, what are the working conditions of their the workers, and if more people buy into it and adapt this, and it becomes a much stronger voice, then I think we keep on pushing the envelope. And in reality, it's something that can't be solved tomorrow, but it's the small steps that really make the difference within all these different micro sectors within the bigger sector.
Can I just add one last thought here, is that, and this is a really unpopular thought of the day. But, Kenya contributes so much to the world economy, right? You think about, some of the largest flour producers in the world are in Kenya. Something that a lot of people don't know. Kenya produces some of the best coffee in the world. Kenya has, some of the most amazing national parks and wildlife in the world, and that each of us around the world can contribute to a better world in a different way. And I don't know, I'm at least humbled by that perspective, that the world seems to be moving towards a more nationalistic place, and I'm kind of sad by that, because I think we are all better, stronger together as a world. Whether it be in the fashion contribution, we all contribute to the fashion story, or to the global trade. Anyhow, I know it's a little bit. So there's a lot of Americans that want to close their borders, and I'm disappointed by that. Yeah.
Aren't we all? But until the best friends stop fighting. Okay. I just think that everything that I know, they'll never let me into the States. Not trying to head there. Anyway, challenges, solutions that I'm thinking about. If we're looking at some of the challenges that we have between the quality control, between our dumping grounds and the narratives of them, what are some of the things that you think that, and I'm going to start with you, Mutete, and then kind of bring it down to Janet and Steven. What are some of the things that you think would be some of that you see as a challenge and as a solution? So maybe you could offer one each. If somebody stumps you, then we can try to think about something else. And you could pass it on.
Just to be clear, just to understand your question, are you asking what's a challenge of the secondhand industry and what's a solution that's directly linked to the challenge? I think the biggest challenge would be the grade at which we receive clothes. Like, people buy bales and spend their investments in bales and find that 50%, 40% of the bales of unusable materials, quality clothes, in one way or another, whether they're soiled. We receive soiled clothes. Let me catch my
Story
breath.
for another day. Well,
yeah,
okay.
So it's very wanting the quality that comes in, but Steven has just educated me in terms of like the purchase power of different countries, Kenya as opposed to Japan. But I think that within the sorting centers, whether it's where they're coming from and in Kenya, we really need to have, and I guess I'm going into the solution, we really need to have be very strict on the quality that is coming into our country, into our continent, or is even leaving the sorting facility in the first place, whether it's coming to Kenya, whether it's going to Ghana, whether it's going to India, or wherever it's going. I think we really need mutaratara, for lack of a better, I don't know, really like a structure, like a structured system.
Like a deep structure for what comes into the continent.
Deep and strict structure. We really need to be strict.
We have so much work because we're still trying to figure out what inter-Africa trade looks like. It is disturbing.
But I think
again,
even
policies,
but I'll let the.
It's a wish list. It doesn't say that it's never.
Yeah, that's true. I'll let Janet and Stephen go because I have something else. But I'll let them go first, and then we'll see if they've said it.
I think I can just Same thing as Bakita, to be honest. But for me, the challenge to me, I see it as a language problem, because, and I'm speaking it as an experience, an experience here in Kenya. And one of the things that people who, or like a group that's pro secondhand clothing continuing to come in unchecked, like, we do have a quality problem, right? Because not everything that comes in will end up being either reused or resold. But because we are using secondhand clothes as reusing clothes that would otherwise end up in the landfill, so we are contributing to circularity. Like, all that is great, but like, we're used to using these buzzwords to avoid the reality of what the fashion industry is contributing to our communities. And I think, to me, I see textile waste as a term that is still, I call it like, it's still a work in progress term, because I don't think anyone yet agrees what textile waste actually means. Like, what we see as textile waste in Kenya is not the same thing that is textile waste in Ghana. And I think we've also seen that from, like, let's say the videos that we see from the Foundation and the reports that they bring in. Because when I think about how Kenyans treat clothes, what they probably see as waste in Ghana is not how we would see it. And there are so many amazing initiatives that want to reuse this excess clothes in the market. For example, there's Remedy Studio that make bags from oversized clothes in the market. There's, I think, Mabatini Studio that also source oversized clothes and curtains and whatnot to use. Like, there's a lot of amazing initiatives in the space, but again, there's no money to support them. So it's amazing that we all have ways to extend the lives of the textiles that come into the country. But when all these businesses and brands have to dig into their pockets to help manage this fashion waste, then I think it slows down and it waters down the progress that we would otherwise achieve. And the one thing that I would want most businesses in this space, especially in, let's say, in Africa, to get is funding to support the work, because we're doing really great things. And I would also want it to, at some point, be affordable for Kenyans to buy as well, because right now upcycled products are really expensive and it can only be sold to people who are not from Africa, or like not very, but like at least wealthy Kenyans to buy. And
Yeah.
and we treat sustainable products or upcycled products as things that only some type of people can achieve in the community, then we will still be struggling with this idea of circularity and sustainability in the fashion space locally.
I like that. Just, I mean, we were talking about that being like, yeah, how it's very elitist to upcycle, and everybody, it's so unaffordable to afford it's unaffordable for the, upcycled clothing here. But yeah, go ahead, Steven. What's your thoughts?
I think the 2 points made by the two of you are like really solid. I think if I just to take a completely different perspective on it, what I'm most concerned about is the devolution of clothing made just worldwide. Like, the quality of what people are making now is becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So the Sheins of the world and the Teamies of the world, they need to pay their taxes, and they need to have some kind of transparency and equal testing, because ultimately, if the Americans and Canadians and Europeans buy all this really cheap fast fashion and we sort it and then we end up sending it to Kenya, it's basically polluting the ecosystem which it is existing, right? So you end up with cheaper and cheaper clothes ending up in all the world's markets, period. So without them paying on equal footing the taxes, without them contributing to transparency and even chemical testing, I think their business model is really killing the global fashion industry. They're pouring poison in everybody's soup, and I feel like that needs to stop.
There's got to be ways of actually having, fashion revolution. Maybe those are some of the things where campaigns need to be brought up, and especially into our market, especially if it's not being tested, and it's sinking into the Gikombas and the Dandoras. I mean, it just really messes around with even the quality of what we're getting here. Even the sorters are not even going to be able to figure that out at some point. Oh, they will know, but then anyway, it still will come our way, and be treated as the dump sites that they look at us as, unfortunately. If I'm looking at, go ahead.
Just a quick one. All fantastic points. They're all very valid points. And just to add on top of that, I think also educating and taking this conversation into spaces that people are not knowledgeable on this topic. Does that make sense? So you find that we often talk to ourselves, and this is a conversation that we constantly have with Janet, with Nathalie, that as much as we are, having these conversations, at the end of the day, it's almost like we're also talking to each other. So finding these unconventional, quote unquote, spaces to really, spread the information. What's in your clothes? Do you know where your clothes have come from? How does it affect you? How does it affect our environment? How does it affect the animals and your future and your children's future? So having these conversations in spaces that may not normally have these conversations is something that I think would also be a solution.
So agree with that. And we said we're going to have more of those conversations. I mean, in terms of our ongoing, partnerships and figuring out ways of even getting the word out there, bigger, better. Huge. I'm just thinking of, platforms and I feel like this is where a lot of people will go to is there's Kenya Fashion Week coming up, there's Nairobi Fashion Week, all these fashion weeks. So all of them need to be a little bit more educated into what is happening. And it could be an Africa reach, where we all have one message at one time, during the same time that we all start pushing an agenda and that will allow our governments to even pay attention, that will allow people to be like, hey, what's going on? What is this happening? What is happening within this sector? But again, in my head, we could do it all. But it would be lovely to have something, a movement of some sort, get the guys from Nigeria, from Ghana, Nana from Ghana, Lucila, Tumi, and all these people, from South Africa, West Africa, North Africa, just to have the same agenda, the same mindset of look at what's happening and can we change even the designers' mindsets, right? Would be really something fantastic to see happen. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities and value adds, with everything that's happening, even within the secondhand clothing. But looking at 10 years ahead, what do we envision? I mean, Steven, what do you envision 10 years ahead from where we're sitting right now, hoping that the conversations will have changed, obviously, but do we even have those 10 years? Planet.
Man, the world seems so topsy-turvy. I'm trying to think 10 days. Forget about 10 years. What's going to happen in 10 months from now? It's like, man, what's going on? I think, look, I feel like I feel like that conversations like this roundtable, it gives you hope that that this too will pass, this crazy moment that we're going through, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the hope that I have, and why I was excited to join you guys today. You know, it's like this, we just keep talking to each other worldwide. We're gonna figure this out.
Yeah, we should get a couple of more people on board for even the next one and the next roundtable, and we just keep the conversations going at least once a month. Get somebody else to jump in, hear their perspective. How can they help? How, you know, what kind of partnerships, collaborations? I keep talking about that. I know it's such an excessive use of of two words, collaboration and partnerships, but I see nothing else of how do we move forward without having the right people at the right table doing the right thing and moving in the right direction. So it's constantly for me a big push of what does fashion revolution need? What does Janet need in order to continue doing what she's doing? The core, I will keep jumping into everybody's DM like I did with you, Stephen, and just continue to push those conversations. And you know, that for me, and thank you so much for being here, but that for me is where we sit, you know.
I appreciate it. All right. Well, hey, you guys,
Yeah.
it must be late, so get some rest.
Famous last words for everyone.
I would say.
So, go ahead.
Okay. I would say just take care of your clothes. Mend them, fix them. You do it as a group, do it by yourself, learn a new skill, touch a needle, learn how to, you know, what's it called? Thread the needle. Yeah, and just show up for yourself and honor your clothes. I think I'd say that.
Like that.
Yeah. I would say, like, be willing or be open to unlearn what we know about fashion or about clothes. And there's something else I wanted to say, but I've forgotten. Yeah, but yeah, that's.
Like that. Stephen?
I think we just got to stay humble. You know, there's no one solution. There's no one magic bullet here. There's no one thing. We all just have to stay humble and work together to figure this out. You know, we just got to stay humble.
I love that. Thank you. So unquestioned, stay humble, thread and needle. And for me, it's just an absolute honor and thank you. To you guys, thank you to Skyward Express, Extreme, Sierra Perfumes, all my Cali works. Thank you to ACT for Rep Fashion Revolution. Janet, thank you so much. You guys have really made my week. I've never done 2 in a row, but these are first time for everything. But I really appreciate it. So you guys take care of yourselves and on to the next one. And Stephen will keep you posted on all the excellent things that we'll be doing out here. And do let us know how you can jump into our conversations anytime.
I appreciate you guys. All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you.
See you, ladies. Bye. Thanks.